Okay. Brian, when you're ready to go. Yeah, he says to give a wave, we'll give him a wave. Okay. No, you should be all set. Mics are live.
So we just
and
push them.
Just hit the record. Okay. Good evening. We're going to start the meeting of the Committee of Infrastructure on February 14th, 2018 at 7 o'clock. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Alderman Lopez. Alderman Schmidt, I'm here. Alderman Jettie. Here. Alderman Gidge.
Here.
Okay, we did hear from Alderman Lopez. He says he had important business this evening, so he is excused. Also in attendance that we can expect to speak this evening will be Mr. Tim Cummings, Community Development Director. And James Vail is also in attendance. Okay. Next, we'll open up the meeting to public comment. Seeing none, we'll move to a motion.
I recommend take the bill off the table.
Okay, there's a motion by Alderman Gidge to take from the table 018001. You can affirm by your voice vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? Okay. Well, we shall now open up discussions of the motion 01801, and I would invite Mr. Cummings to please come up and to give us discussion on it, please, and Mr. Vail as well. Thank you, sirs.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, and through you to the committee. For the record, my name is Tim Cummings. I'm the Director of Economic Development for the city. I'm here before you this evening looking for your favorable adoption of a piece of legislation that's before you relative to Front Street and prohibiting on-street parking on the Front Street area. Before you on the screen is the map of the area that we are discussing. As you all may or may not know, we have a significant development occurring on Franklin Street with 200 units of housing going in, which was a previously blighted and abandoned mill building, and that's being done by Brady Sullivan. In conjunction with that project, during the site plan process, it was noted by the fire department and other public safety officials that Front Street is very narrow, and having on-street parking will cause a problem, particularly when you try to get back to the cotton mill building, as there is housing back there, now that this street area is going to become more activated. With Brady Sullivan's acknowledgement and with no opposition from them, there was a stipulation in their site plan that no parking could be allowed on the public's right-of-way with their development, and we thought from the city's perspective it may be best just to memorialize it officially and prohibit any on-street parking for Front Street, which is what the legislation before you outlines. Now, it has been raised, as I understand it, some concerns surrounding access to what we've been referring to as a boat launch, but I would suggest that that is a very generous description of what is there. There is access right in this area to the river, and through conversations with Brady Sullivan, and it is memorialized in their site plan approval, they have allowed access to 2 of their parking spaces that is currently under construction. The map in front of you doesn't show it because it's dated, but if you were to go out there, you would see some 13 or so head-in parking spaces in the area where my arrow is hovering over. The 2 closest parking spaces to the access to the riverfront, essentially this area right in here, is acknowledged and will be available to the public for access to this quote-unquote boat ramp. With that being said, Mr. Chairman, I defer to you in the committee and would look forward to your favorable recommendation of this.
Recognize Alderman McCarthy.
The two spaces that they're giving us, are they signed as reserved for the boat launch or marked, you're allowed to park there?
It is, that's an excellent question, Mr. President. It is, I just confirmed with the Brady Sullivan this evening that there's signage prepared. I don't know exactly how it reads, but signage will be displayed anytime now, and it will make it explicit that parking is available for the boat launch.
I guess the difference being if it's just says available for the boat launch, residents are likely to park in it anyway, and then it's not available for the boat launch.
I will make sure it's explicit with Brady Sullivan. They, in my conversations with them not an hour ago, understood the intention and want to make sure that those two spaces are available.
All right, thank you. Alderman, is there a
Did you have a
follow-up, Alderman
Yeah.
McCarthy? Follow-up.
I just wanted to comment, I've been out and looked at the site, and I think, I mean, just based on the amount of activity that can take place at the launch, which is really just some, it's very nice, but it's just granite steps. I mean, you'd be hard pressed to take a canoe down there. It'd be a long trek. But carrying a kayak and setting it in is possible. I doubt more than two people will do that at the same time. So I think the two spaces are useful. If we were to run into a problem with it in the future, I think one of the things you can do is the walkway itself has a bollard up near the power substation, and down that way, yeah. If we were to move that back, there's a segment of lawn there where you can see the power pole, which from what I saw of it, some of it may actually have been in use recently as an encampment. I'll just call it. It would be possible to create an access to that and put a couple more spaces down there if that ever made sense.
I absolutely agree, and we could definitely look at that, especially as we continue with the planning of the riverfront.
I will recognize Alderman Melissa Goja, please.
Yes, I guess my concern is also about additional spaces in the development of the riverfront. And when we had the presentation around the development of the riverfront, this was indicated as the reason for putting the platform there is because it's one of the shallowest spaces in the river, and so it would make it the easiest for boat launching. So although at this point it may not get a lot of use, in our projections, which I would like to believe are true, that we will see more use in that area if we make it more accessible. I have two concerns. One is is two an appropriate number, an adequate number, especially in thinking that if two people come there and they spend an hour or two on the river and someone else comes, what's going to happen? And so are we going to be able to put more spaces in? And I know we had talked about doing something in the development of the river with the screening around that power area. And I don't know if that will buy us spaces, but I am concerned that, you know, if we want people to enjoy the river, they're going to want to do probably more than put their boat in and drive to one of the garages and walk back a couple of blocks. So I just think the reality of that and having parking that supports the use we project for the river is my concern. Just a thought after thinking about the projection for that area and why we specifically chose that area for that platform and boat launch, because everything else is really pretty deep along the river.
Mr. Cummings, if I may, and to glom onto her, and then I'll let you answer. It may be proper time to discuss Milliard Technologies and the boat ramp that is there. And if you'd be so kind to give us the information, as you can see the location on the map, we're talking not too far out of the neighborhood. And what would be the proper procedure for our citizens to utilize that in the parking available there?
So, Mr. Chairman, your point is well taken, and for now at least, the more logical place to park for long-term, if you wanted access to the river, would be through the Mill Yard Technology Park. The ownership has given city permission through a waiver, which you can access through their corporate offices in the Mill Yard Technology Park, to the riverfront through essentially a boat launch where my arrow is pointing over. Milliard Technology Park has restriped their parking lot to allow for parking, including accommodations for trailers and canoes and kayaks and whatnot, because they understand that this area is one of the few areas in a very congested downtown setting that could accommodate the usage as it's currently outlined. That would be my recommendation for someone in the city if they were looking to access the river and park for a long term and be able to have the enjoyment of the river that they're looking for. The point is well taken, though, about the limited access in this area. And as we continue to look to activate the riverfront, being cognizant of the constrained parking and making sure we address it needs to be a priority. And I think between myself and Director Marchant, we will ensure that that is addressed moving forward.
Alderman Militia Gosha, please.
Yes, and Director Cummings, I'm confident you will address it. I just feel like it needs to be brought up because we certainly can't look at this in isolation, especially since that was such a big part of the riverfront development plan. And I guess if Brady Sullivan would give us 3 spaces, I'd like it better. And in terms of the signage that goes on there, even if we have one of them that's, launching or loading and unloading or whatever, and the other 2 may be longer, but I'm just concerned about that whole parking aspect there. But I do agree with Alderman McCarthy that there may be space up there to do some other things as we look at getting rid of some of the overgrowth and reconfiguring some things that are up there. But again, I think that's a major aspect of the development, and that boat launch was certainly one of the primary points of riverfront development in that area. Thank you.
Okay, Alderman McCarthy, please.
I just want to make a couple of points about the Milliard boat launch. I think since those photos were taken, they have striped the parking lot to block off a section as trailer access to the ramp only, and then also
It's this area, right?
the section that's over to the on that side, but to the right of it is now marked as boat trailer parking only.
Right here.
Also, with regard to the waiver, for anybody who's listening, they've actually gone one better now, and they have a couple of boxes out there. There's a form that you just fill out the first time you go there and drop it in the other box. There weren't any there last week, but that would make sense. So it's very easy for the public to access that ramp.
So, Mr. Chairman,
Okay. Alderman Gedge?
Well, they're dropping off boats right across the river. There's Water Street parking lot. Somebody dropped them off and floated across, pick them up. That might solve all the problems because that's hardly ever full. There are times it is when there are parties going on, but usually it's you can almost throw a rock across from where the boat launch is.
Director Cummings.
So just to address that very specific issue, although this image doesn't really show it, there's a significant grade change between the river and the Water Street parking lot. So access from this side of the river as of today is not conducive, and that's, just to keep that in the back of your mind. The point I wanted to raise relative to the additional parking, I would be more than happy to continue to have a conversation with Brady Sullivan and see if they would be willing to allow for additional parking. I can tell you that they are very constrained for their own parking, so I don't know how successful I'll be in that conversation. But I would be more than happy to have that conversation. That, though, in my opinion, is a separate endeavor than really the question that's before you as to whether you want to prohibit any parking on Front Street. And the reason why that is before you is because our public safety personnel has raised it as an issue. If parking is legally allowed on the street, it has been made to me very clear that a fire truck will not have access. And I just want to make sure that I separate the two issues, because I would like to make sure I have clear direction as to what folks would like me to do.
Alderman Melissa Goja.
Yes, thank you. I have been back there for events prior to you coming to the city where there has been parking in certain areas on both sides, and I would fully support that because regular vehicles had problems getting through.
I appreciate your comments of separating the apples and the oranges, but I'm still quite happy because I think our river is a natural resource for our city that is underutilized, and I strongly encourage our residents to use it. Being the former director of the dive team, I know we do use the Mill Yard access point, at the back of Technology Square, which seems to be good for trailering boats and everything. It's a calmer point in the river. If you look from this Portage Point, you got the bridge and you're going right over this. You got the bumpers there, but you got the dam there too. So I would say the safer part to learn to navigate initially might be the Technology Square portion of it in the back of that facility. But I do appreciate strongly your comments. What we're talking here, the question before us seems to be on the issue of public safety versus the parking. But I'm glad that, as far as the boat ramps, but I'm glad we're bringing up that's something that's very important with the boat ramps. Alderman Jettie.
So just while I think of it, if you could go back to the Mill Yard parking lot. So I just want to point out that the boat ramp is not there.
Yeah, to your left, yeah.
It's right there. See that that paved area? That's where the boat ramp is. And, I really am delighted that Mr. Spilios has been gracious enough to allow us to use that, but that could change tomorrow. All we need is for some people to misuse that property, and he, he would, could. I hope he never does, but he could say, no, you can't use that anymore. So as long-range planners, I'm hoping that you take a longer view. I don't know if there's some way that we can firm up the relationship with Mr. Spilios. That would be terrific if we could. But getting back to Front Street, so I've seen presentations about our master plan for the river, and it involves extensive development of recreational activity and opportunities and access. The master plan envisions our featuring the river, this asset that we have. We don't have an ocean like Portsmouth does, but we have a couple of rivers that that are underutilized right now. And I'm impressed with the master plan, but the master plan provides for quite a bit of new activity in this area. And I think that, maybe it's too late, maybe we can't do anything about it now, but I'm disappointed that we may have missed an opportunity to provide parking for that. Maybe, when we talked about this the last time, we weren't sure that there was going to be any parking available, and that was a concern that I raised. It's good to know that there are at least 2 parking spots. I've used this, and I wouldn't diminish it. I mean, it's, people may say, well, it's not a boat ramp. No, it isn't a boat ramp, but it is very usable for kayaks and also canoes. And I've used it, and I know a lot of people have used it. It's as a recreational kayaker, it's nice to be able to enter the river at that point, because it's kind of fun to go under the bridge, go towards the dam, turn around, come back, along the mill, along Clock Tower, and under the footbridge, and under it's quite interesting, the mill buildings there, and people, yes, as long as the mill yard ramp is available, people can enter it there, but it's a longer way, and the mill yard is not the area that the master plan envisions development at, and I'm wondering, are we being short-sighted in not making sure that the facilities that we're proposing to build on the north side of the river, that people are going to have a place to park in order to use them. I don't know what other land is available there. I don't know if there are other people who own parking areas that would be willing to enter into some kind of a partnership with us to provide that. But I think the time to do that is now. The longer we wait, the less available that opportunity becomes. And I don't know, maybe in the future, the south side of the river, I agree with you. It's right now, there's no way that you can enter the river unless you jumped off the bridge and swam. But I don't know if in the future we could do something there on that side. If the north side is unavailable to us now, we ought to make sure that in our planning that the south side remains available.
Director Cummings with Alderman Gidge in the queue. Thank you.
Thank you. The points are very well taken, and I don't want to get into too much of a riverfront master planning conversation this evening. I know we are going to have a discussion at PEDC later on in the month or in early March, where we can go into the details. I will say, for the record, though, the master plan studied 4 areas within the riverfront, from basically starting at Mine Falls Park right around here, looping around to the other side of the Millyard Technology Park, which we would have as the Broad Street Parkway Bridge, then another phase going all the way from the bridge to the Main Street Bridge, and then from Main Street to Railroad, Railroad Bridge, which I believe is right there, for 1, 2, 3, and then to, did we go?
You went a little too far.
I did go too far.
The railroad bridge is behind BAE, and then the fourth phase is from the railroad bridge to the Bridge Street
Bridge,
Bridge.
the next
To the
bridge
Bridge
up,
Street Bridge,
right.
so ending at the Bridge Street Bridge. So 4 phases, studying this area, where we have differing concepts of how we could activate the riverfront because it is a natural asset that's underperforming for the city. Specifically in this area, to the point of parking, and this is all going to be predicated on whether we can develop public-private partnerships. This land is all spoken for, but we have ideally mapped out this area for potentially a structured parking garage. Now, this is currently privately owned by a church, and we would need to have a more detailed conversation, but we've started that conversation, and it has been one that I would say we're cautiously optimistic on. The other area is right in this area, right here, where we would be looking to potentially do some sort of structured parking using the grade to our advantage. You could drive down here, have a parking space, and then use the grade to your advantage, and you could have a parking deck on top of it, and you could do that. That's another thought, all in terms of trying to increase our supply. But we would need to continue to advance those conversations and create a funding source to be able to allow us to do that. That backs into my previous comment, which is, during the PEDC meetings and budget review, we are going to be talking about ways that we can activate the master plan by giving this city a revenue source to be able to try to adopt and operationalize the thoughts that were developed over the summer.
Alderman Gedge.
The issue, I believe, is parking. I think, the parking on the sides that we wish to eliminate. I believe that if that many people started going down there and canoeing, I'm sure we could put some stairs down at other spots. But at this point, Front Street's just you can't park on it. I went down there after the meeting, and across the street, you've got the credit union. So if you think of 3 cars coming in and 3 cars trying to get out, and the credit union across the street is very busy, then, can't be parking.
Any further questions to Director Cummings?
How far, could I,
Alderman Jettie.
how far does Front Street actually go? Where does it end? Does it go through that parking lot to the left, or is it?
Dead ends, I'm pretty sure right here.
So so after this, where your arrow is there, that's the end of the street? And
That's,
And
if
that-
I may, Mr. Chairman, that's where the city's right-of-way ends.
and so beyond that, there's a parking lot? So how,
That,
okay.
that would become private parking or private access.
Those cars that we see there, near your arrow there, where are they going?
To what I believe would be Caro's building right here, which is, a commercial use, non-housing, non-residential housing, is all supporting this parking right here.
There is a gated fence that separates the industrial versus the Cotton Mill Square, which you see is number 30 on the map.
They may have some access easements and whatnot, cross-access easements. I would have to look into that. But from the city's perspective, our right-of-way ends right there.
So there's no access from, Front Street doesn't continue and hook up with Franklin Street further down?
The city may have an access easement. I would have to check.
Yeah, at this point, no further follow-up, but I'm gonna ask Alderman McCarthy with Alderman Militia Goja in the queue.
Yeah, there is no connection because there is no crossing over the railroad track from Franklin to the other side at the end there. And as I recall, there may even be about a 2-foot drop from Franklin Street to the level of the tracks. I was going to point out, with regard to the question I was asked a little while ago, we do have a written agreement on the boat ramp at the mill yard that was passed last year, year and a half ago, as our 16056.
Good.
Thank you. Alderman Militia Goja.
Yeah. I was just going to comment that if you come if you go from Main Street on Franklin Street where it curves on your left, there's a gate that was put in, and it was put in at the time Cotton Mill Square was being developed to keep traffic from cutting through there at the time. And as Alderman McCarthy pointed out, you go over the tracks and it kind of drops down there. So right now, as Director Cummings said, Front Street in terms of the city and the street just runs from Franklin Street to that line on the map into the parking lots.
Alderman Jettie.
So, while you're here and while the map is in front of us, I'm suggesting, I want to suggest to you that we keep in mind the possibility that there might be, that we might want to provide access from Franklin Street to the Broad Street Parkway. I mean, the whole purpose of the Broad Street Parkway was to lessen the pollution in the railroad, the Main Street Bridge, Franklin Street, Canal Street, Railroad Square area, the traffic all getting backed up there and emitting fumes. I remember a number of years ago, I don't know if it was the EPA, but somebody told us it was at dangerous levels, and that was one of the motivations to provide another access across the river to lessen that. And with all this development here with the Cotton Mill and the Brady Sullivan Building and talk of other stuff, it would be great if we could somehow get that traffic out of there onto the Broad Street Parkway, onto the turnpike, and not so that those people wouldn't have to go through the Franklin Street, Main Street, Bridge, Water Street intersection.
All right, if we can move it along, because we do have another meeting, I would like to thank Director Cummings for coming up. As you could tell, there was several questions, and Mr. Bale, thank you for coming and answering the questions of the Infrastructure Committee. I will ask the clerk now to please read the pending question before us and a motion, please.
Prohibiting parking on both sides of the entire length of Front Street. I'd like to move to recommend passage.
Okay, you all heard the pending question of 018001, prohibiting parking on both sides of the entire length of Main Street. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Seeing none, motion passes. Moving on, there's possible non-public session, not at this particular meeting. Nobody for any further comment. And I look to Alderman Gidge. Do you have a motion to adjourn?
In the meeting.
Okay, there is a motion by Alderman Gidge to adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries, thank you. We're going to declare the Infrastructure Committee meeting ending at 7:33. Please feel free to sit in your seats. We're going to change, and we're going to go right into a combined joint committee meeting at this particular time.
Feel free to get up
Thank you.
quickly if you need to as we change.
So, Brian. No, do you want the speaker still on the,
Alderman Gidge,
yes?
I didn't hear your motion. Could
You sure?
Yes.
All right. Do you want the microphones on or the?
They're on because this is.
Everything is, and I think we still might be live. We're live on the mics. We're gonna keep that.
He'll turn it off.
Yeah.
Did you give her 2 copies? Okay, thanks. This one helps with minutes, and we can have one for you to write on. Thank you. It's not in his eyes. You all set? You guys set? Are you guys set?
I'm all set, yep.
Okay. All right, I will call to order a joint meeting of the Planning and Economic Development Committee and the Committee on Infrastructure on Wednesday, February 14th, 2018 at 7:36 PM. And Alderman Schmidt, who clerks for both committees, will call the roll for both committees, please.
Alderwoman Malizia-Golia.
Present.
Alderman Jettie.
Here.
Alderman Tenza.
Here.
Alderman Laws.
Here.
And Alderman Schmidt, who is also here. Also, Alderman O'Brien.
Present.
Alderman Lopez is excused tonight. Alderman Jettie
I'm here
and
again.
Alderman Gidge.
Okay, and also in attendance, we have Director Cummings, and Mr. Veo and Alderman McCarthy. And everyone. Okay, do I have a motion for this evening? Alderman O'Brien.
Yes, I would like to make a motion that the Joint Infrastructure Committee and PED Committee to go into non-public session
By roll call.
by
Per-
roll call.
Pursuant to RSA 91A3, 2D, to consider the acquisition, sale, or lease of real or personal property which, if discussed in public, would likely benefit a party or parties whose interests are adverse to those of the general community.
Yes.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Alderman Tenza. And if the clerk would do a roll call, please.
Alderwoman Malizia-Golia.
Yes.
Alderman Jettie.
Yes.
Alderman Tenza.
Yes.
Alderman Laws.
Yes.
Alderman Schmidt votes yes. Alderman O'Brien.
Yes.
Alderman Jettie
Yes.
and Alderman Gidge.
Yes.
Okay, and we have 7 yeas and 0 nays. That motion carries. And we are in non-public session as of 7:38 PM.